The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Daily Racing Form's Dubai World Cup webinar. I'm your host, Dan Illman, and I'm very pleased to have two excellent handicappers with me today, Daily Racing Form's international co-correspondent Marcus Hersh and Timeform analyst Mark Milligan. In this webinar, Marcus and Mark will handicap the 8 thoroughbred races on the Saturday card. If we have time at the end of the webinar, we will take some of your questions. If we don't have time, you can always reach us on Twitter. My handle is at @DRF_Dan Illman. Marcus can be found at DRF Hersh, and Mark resides on Twitter at Mark_Milligan73. I'd also like to remind you that soon after the completion of the webinar, it will be available for review, free and on demand, at video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Before we get to the handicapping, I'd like to ask our panelists a few questions about the racing surface. Last year, many horse players noticed an inside speed bias that may have flattered the winning performances of Thunder Snow and Mendelssohn in the World Cup and UAE Derby, respectively. Beginning with Mark, have you noticed a similar trend during this year's racing carnival, and is it something to seriously consider when handicapping Saturday's races?
Yeah, I think the way the Meydan track plays and is set up will always play well to inside speed. Although we've dug out some stats at Timeform for the last 3 years, and certainly last year's carnival was a bit of an anomaly where front-running winners are concerned. There was probably about 33% more front-running winners than there had been in the previous season or 2 seasons, and they've kind of reverted to type this year. So although inside speed is generally always good at Meydan, it hasn't been quite to the same extent it was last season.
Marcus, would you agree with that trend? How important is inside speed in your handicapping at Meydan as compared to our American racing surfaces?
Yeah, well, I think Mark, the statistics that Mark's applied bear out what like the anecdotal evidence is for people who have been here all winter, and just watching the races. I feel like horses who are off the rail and or behind have had a greater chance this year. I don't know exactly how things are going to play out. Obviously on Saturday, one of the bigger things is that there's severe kickback on this very sandy track, and there are a lot of horses here who have come from Europe and aren't used to any kind of kickback, much of just dirt in general. So getting hit with a kickback is very discouraging to horses in behind who aren't used to it, and that helps promote horses that make the lead or close and in the clear. One thing that we really noticed, and the 2 horses you mentioned, Dan, from last year, Thunder Snow and Mendelssohn, are perfect examples of this. With the right horse that gets on the lead and enjoys this surface, it makes them look better than they are, because, and we've still been seeing this despite the trend toward more fair racing. We saw it in Super Saturday races with Capizano, who's in the World Cup, for instance. Get to the front, control the pace. The other horses behind get discouraged, like the kickback, and you see a lot of huge open length victories here that you can't necessarily put a lot of faith in.
Next, a post-position question for both of you. Are there any barrier draws that are advantageous or hurtful over the various distances and on dirt and turf? For example, are Thunder, Snow, and Coal Front hurt by their outside posts in their respective races?
Yeah, I think they are. Certainly Thunder Snow, who was drawn wide last year, but he got a really easy trip last year when he was able to cross to the rail. I don't think he'll get that kind of trip this time around. And it's worth bearing in mind as well, although the mile is a 1-turn mile, it's a dogleg 1-turn mile, similar to the setup at, say, Churchill Downs. So horses who are drawn wide in the mile races on dirt don't have a great record.
Yeah, exactly. These, and the 2-turn races, especially the UAE Derby, there's not which is a mile and 3/16 roughly. There's not a lot of room run to the first turn, and even in the World Cup itself, if you can't do what Thundersnow did last year, brake sharply, get over, you're going to lose some precious ground in the first turn, which is a big problem. The straight course turf race, the Alcoa Sprint, everyone wants to be outside. That wasn't that well known several years ago, but it seems like everybody is now. If you look the way the race is run, people head up over to get over the crown of the tracks. You don't get pushed down too far inside when you hit the meet up with the main track and cross over that into the actual home straight of the turning track. So a horse like Stormy Liberal, who's posted in one, that's definitely far from ideal.
Let's begin with the handicapping with the Godolphin Mile, and Mark, we'll start off with you. It appears there is going to be a rather heavy favorite in this race in Muntaza, who was the runner-up in this race last year, but was simply dominant in winning the Burj Nahar last time out. Is this a situation where Muntaza will turn the tables on last year's Godolphin winner Heavy Metal? Is the American entrant Coldfront good enough to win, or is there a long shot lurking in the weeds?
Yeah, I think Muntazar, and you've mentioned he finished second last year. This season's version of Muntazar is much, much improved. And that win last time out by 10 lengths was a really, really impressive performance. I think the key for Muntazar is how Heavy Metal breaks inside of him, because Heavy Metal broke slowly, completely missed the kick last time and could never get anywhere near the front. And Muntazar got a really good trip there. If Heavy Metal doesn't break again from post 5, Muntazar probably gets a really good trip from 6 and will prove tough to beat. I think where Coldfront is concerned, I think the post 12 is a real negative for him. He's going to be hung wide. He's going to have to break quickly. He's probably going to, best case scenario, be hung at least 3 wide, and I see post 12 as a real negative for Coldfront.
Yeah,
Mark.
Yeah, Coldfront's got to go. He has plenty of speed. I'm going to be against Coldfront, and also I think Muntazah might have run too well last time. I don't know that that's the ideal prep race for the big night, the World Cup night. I think he's going to have trouble duplicating that, particularly if he's taken on early, and I think he will be. I actually kind of like a horse in this race, and that would be the less probably well-regarded American True Timber. I think that you can probably just pitch his Pegasus World Cup, the sloppy track, and or the 1 1/8. I did him in. I think the slop more than anything. And if you go back then and look at his previous form, culminating in admittedly a down cigar mile from top to bottom, but if he can reproduce that form, which is a 1-turn mile like this, he's going to have an excellent opportunity. And I'm trying not to get too wound up about the appearance of horses this year, because that can tell you some lies. What I'm doing is not focusing on negative, but trying to, because I think positive impressions do mean more, and True Timber has made a very positive impression. He has traveled phenomenally. I really love the way that he's trained in the mornings that I've seen him since I've been here, and he's 10-1 on the line. In the North American tote, he might be less than that, but I think he's going to have a great chance.
Marcus, let's move on to the 2-mile Dubai World Cup, and truly an international event. We've got the Melbourne Cup winner Cross Counter in here. We've got Call the Win, a Group 1 winner at Longchamp last fall. And then we've got Ispolini, who, ever since being stretched out to 14 furlongs, has just looked like a different horse during the racing carnival. The question for him, obviously, is the 2 miles. This is really going to be a fun race, a good betting race. Who do you fancy?
Yeah, Ispolini is the one for me. He won't be the favorite. Cross Counter is a favorite. Obviously, the Melbourne Cup winner is winning that race is a feather in his cap. It was his first try at the really staying 2-mile distance, and he did fine. I know from talking to some Australian experts, he was very much on the best part of a track that had taken some rain and was kind of way deeper on the inside than the outside. He got a perfect trip in that sense, because though he lost ground, he did come around everybody. it's his first run of the year. He's probably a little overrated just on the back of that one race where he did get some weight. And Ispolini, I don't think he's going to have any trouble negotiating the 2 miles. Granted, his open length victory in his last race here, the favorite in that race unfortunately suffered an injury and didn't complete the race. And there was not a lot behind him, but just watching the way that he went about his business, he's a horse that's thriving right now. He actually was highly enough regarded, I think, to entertain thoughts of running in the Epsom Derby with him. He didn't pan out as a 3-year-old, but he's a young horse with considerable upside, and I like him to post. I mean, probably second choice, but a little bit of an upside over the favorite cross counter. I do think Prince of Arran will appreciate getting back out to 2 miles after being in Hong Kong and in a shorter race here where he acquitted himself pretty admirably. I think he needs the longer trip because he just doesn't quicken enough.
Yeah, Prince of Arran, for me, I think he could run really well here at a big price. He was third to cross counter in the Melbourne Cup. I think that the 12 furlongs last time was just too inadequate for Prince of Arran, and he's a real grinder, and this 2 miles is right up his street, and I think he'll run really well. Cross counter obviously is going to take plenty of beating, but he's going to be a short price on the back of that, and whether following a 144-day layoff you want to take a short price remains to be seen. Ispolini, he's interesting, and I know I did a broadcast out here a few days ago actually with James Doyle's mother, James Doyle, who was due to ride Ispolini, but they were worried that he might struggle to make the weight, the 8 stone 9. So James Doyle has actually been sent back to England to ride in one of the valuable handicaps on Saturday at Doncaster, the Lincoln Handicap. But I know that James Doyle's really, really torn up about not being able to ride Ispolini. He said that this would have been his best chance of a World Cup night winner. So, you know, Ispolini, for me, he's going to be very tough to beat. But I'd be prepared to take a shot here with Prince of Arran at a big price. And it would be difficult to rule out Freddie Head's Call the Wind as well, who has some top class form in France, and he's likely to be on the premises also.
Let's move on to the Alcois Sprint. We are going 6 furlongs on the turf. A very classy European turf sprinter, Blue Point, figures to go off as a rather heavy favorite in this race for Godolphin and Charlie Appleby, winner of the prestigious King's Stand at 5 furlongs last spring, but has been just dominant in his Dubai sprints here. He is the big favorite. I guess if you're looking perhaps for horses to beat him, Sands of Mali is a Group 1 winner, but is coming off of a rather long layoff. He has not raced since October. And then we've got the American stalwart Stormy Liberal, the Breeders' Cup turf sprinter, breaking down towards the inside. Mark, who do you like in here?
Yeah, I think Blue Point's obviously going to take plenty of beating. It's whether you can stomach the short price, but he's, in terms of ratings, he's kind of head and shoulders above everything in this field. He was a really impressive winner last time. He's down over 6 furlongs. I think if you're looking for knocks on his form, his top class form has been at 5 furlongs when he won the King's Stand sprint at Ascot last year. That's probably his best performance to date. But worth bearing in mind that Ascot is a stiff 6 furlongs with an uphill finish. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that he's just as good over 6. Whether you'd want to play him at that shorter price is debatable, but I think he's very, very much the one to beat. I'd be against Stormy Liberal in here. As Marcus pointed out earlier, I don't think the one post does him any favours, and he couldn't beat Jungle Cat in this last year, and for me Jungle Cat wouldn't be in the same zip code as Blue Point, who's a very, very classy individual.
Yeah, I have nothing ingenious to add to this. I feel pretty much about the race the same way. I guess I would say that I would be more confident. I would say there's a much greater chance that I see Sands of Mali as the one horse with enough upside that he could he could post an upset just because, and his good race at the end of the year and the champion sprint was on soft, but his Commonwealth Cup on much firmer going at Royal Ascot I thought was a really excellent effort as well over the same distance. But as I was trying to get to before I interrupted myself, less chance of Sands of Mali upsetting Blue Point than of Sands of Mali not running second, and somebody else, boosting exotic wagers here, because I think Blue Point, the key to him is, as Charlie Appleby has said, is getting a straight course. If it's straight, it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 6, especially here at Meydan. He loves this course. He has the kind of attributes that make him tough to try to take on, even at a short price, because he travels really well. He's handy, he's athletic, he's got a really great turn of foot. I'm afraid he's probably just going to boss these horses as a short price. One horse, since and absolutely right about Storm Liberal coming close to Jungle Cat rather than Blue Point, and that being a different kettle of fish. But Peter Miller, the trainer, did show that he can send a turf sprinter here and have it run well in the night. And the mare he sent, Belvoir Bay, she started her career in England and ran 4 races down the straightaway and acquitted herself quite admirably. She has run some pretty solid races going 6.5 down the hill at Santa Anita. I think the distance and the course are going to be fine for her. Obviously, the question is of quality, but with luck, maybe she could get into the top 3 at a big price.
Let's move on to the UAE Derby. Marcus, you already have an expanded stakes preview up on video.drf.com and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. This race has important Kentucky Derby qualifying point ramifications. The favorite in this race might very well be a filly, and that is Divine Image, winner of the UAE Oaks, and then a rather handy winner over the males in her most recent start. We've got Walking Thunder in this race, who you might argue is getting a rather important rider switch to Frankie Dettori for this spot. And we also have a couple of American invaders, most notably one you're very familiar with, the newly blinkered Pluga Parfait.
Yeah, important Kentucky Derby ramification in terms of the points, because if you win, you're in. If you run second, you have a decent chance of getting in. But I don't see any horses here that you would think would end up in the Derby with any kind of real chance. Perhaps that will change after the race is actually run. And Divine Image obviously is not running the Derby, nor is she at this point running in the Kentucky Oaks, no matter how well she does. In this race, she's not nominated, and Charlie Appleby told me the other day that she won't be supplemented because he doesn't want her to go over there into that crazy environment at Churchill Downs on Oaks Day, and that speaks to her vulnerability in part. I think here she's a bit difficult. She missed the start 2 races ago and had to grind out a narrow win when considered much the best. Last race was not especially fast, even though she won by open lengths, and she did break better, and that worked out, a completely ideal trip. She got, I thought, absolutely the run of that race. In these horses, these 3-year-olds have taken turns winning races by huge margins this winter. I don't think they're an especially good group. I do think there's a lot of pace in this race. So I guess my 2 major opinions would be Divine Image, vulnerable at a shorter price, could be a strong pace that sets it up for something a little bit off of it. The horse I took on top was the horse you mentioned, Van Pluske Parfait, who was just awful last time in the Risen Star Stakes with no apparent excuse. He didn't have terrible trouble previously in Lecomte, but he didn't have a great trip, starting with a stumbling start. And I think we're starting to see his best performance last year in the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes at the end of the year at Churchill. That race might not have been especially strong. There's been some okay performances out of it. The winner, Signalman, didn't impress anybody really in his first time out as a 3-year-old. But if Pluske Parfait could get back to that level of form, I think he would have a great chance to win this race. The connections do feel that he's traveled especially well. He's actually put on weight. His coat looks great. He's making everybody happy the way he looks. I'm a little discouraged that he just didn't put forth an effort last time. But he is definitely a horse for me to consider here. The horse that's come from William Haggis in England, Jabath, has no dirt in his pedigree and has never been on the dirt, but he has won 4 straight 1,600-meter races on all-weather surfaces. The question for him, I think, really is drawn in 2 and probably outrun early is how he's going to take the kickback, and that's probably going to mean everything.
Yeah, I landed on Walking Thunder in here. I think the booking of Frankie Dettori for this horse is a massive plus. You can forgive his run last time out when he ended up trapped really wide. His jockey took a pull rather than just letting him stride on, and I think Connor Beasley has paid the price for that, to be honest, because although the general propaganda from the Phoenix Syndicate is that Connor Beasley had the choice in here, I don't think he did, and I think Frankie Dettori has been drafted in specifically for this horse because they think this horse is the #1 of the 3 that they've got in here. I think that the 1 post is really good for him. Frankie Dettori is as good a gate jockey as any European jockey. He'll get Walking Thunder out there, he'll get him onto the lead. If the rail plays well, he'll be really, really tough to peg back, particularly with a short run to the first turn. Divine Image, her win last time, it just isn't as good as that win made her seem. Her main rivals, Manguzzi and Estidaf, were both trapped wide that day, and Estidaf didn't run any kind of race at all, and she was left with just a few average locals to beat up. I don't think she's as good as that run makes her out. I think she's probably one of the most vulnerable favourites on the card in here. Interesting what Marcus was saying about Jabath. All his wins have come on synthetic surfaces back in the UK. He has won at a track called Southwell. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with that, Southwell, they run on a surface called fibre sand, and that would be the closest equivalent surface to dirt that we've got in the UK. And he seemed to handle that with no problems at all, but the problem for Jabath here is he's likely to be outrun and he's going to be taking kickback. The horse who probably has the best form of all these is Van Beethoven, and we saw last year how Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore bossed this race with Mendelssohn. Now, Van Beethoven probably wouldn't be in Mendelssohn's class, but his turf form in the UK is as good as anything in here. The doubt for him is obviously the post in 11, although he does have a bit of speed and he has won over 6 furlongs, but I went for Walking Thunder. I think that inside post is going to be crucial.
Let's move on to the Dubai Golden Shaheen, an unfortunate defection in this race. 2-time Breeders' Cup sprint champion Roy H. will not compete on Saturday. We still have several talented North American-based runners, including XY Jet, who's had a couple of just extremely tough losses here in the past. Mark, we'll begin with you. Is this time for XY Jet to finally get over the hump and grab the brass ring in Dubai? Or is there a potential speed duel on the horizon with horses like Promises Fulfilled and Imperial Hint? And that could set things up for a late runner such as the local hope Drafted.
Yeah, I think the connections of Drafted will be hoping that the likes of XY Jet, Promises Fulfilled, I think to a lesser extent maybe Switzerland, all go forward and get into a duel. And I think the problem that XY Jet had, particularly in last year's renewal of this race, was that he just simply went off a little bit too hard and couldn't sustain that. And we've seen with XY Jet's profile, and we go back just 2 starts ago at Gulfstream in the Sunshine Millions sprint, where he went off a little bit too hard and ended up finishing 4th. So if XY Jet gets his own way up front, then he'd be very, very difficult to beat in here, but he's going to get pace pressure. The question is, are any of the locals good enough to pick up these American horses? Because, I mean, Drafted, he does tend to come from way off the pace, but for me, he's just simply not that good. He's, in terms of Timeform metrics, the likes of XY Jet, Promises Fulfilled, Imperial Sky, they're mid-120s horses. Drafted has yet to post a figure beyond 119, and that's that's the problem for me with Drafted, is that he gets a real class test in here. Picking these horses up is going to be something completely different to the horses that he's been picking up over the winter at Meydan. I think Promises Fulfilled here probably sits the best trip for me, just outside XY Jet, and tentatively I landed on him.
Yeah, that is exactly, Mark, how I felt about Drafted. And he's already had 4 runs this winter too. He can't have much more to find. I just don't see it with him. I mean, I really, you know, because of the way the pace looks, I really wanted to find something like him who I thought could get the right trip, and I just can't. I can't get there with any of these alternatives. Switzerland, you know, is a key player here because of the potential he has to show pace, but I think he's so far over the top that he's not going to be a factor at any point in the race. I think he's going to be outrun, and to me, that's very important because everything rests with Jose Ortiz on Imperial Hind for me, because that horse, much more so than XY Jet and Promises Fulfilled, has shown a bit of capability of taking a little bit of a hold and finishing off and passing horses. He's done that on several occasions. His form is obscured by 2 poor runs, and his last race was very disappointing. He had a minor physical problem. Is he over it? The trainer thinks so. One would hope so. He's worked fast. I know they seem to be happy the way he's coming into the race. He does not like Churchill Downs. He also had 2 issues going into that race where he had a little trouble in the morning, I think, tying up a couple days before the race, and also had a stiff back that really concerned his trainer, perhaps owing to his dislike of there. He is a very fast horse on his day, and the reason I mentioned Switzerland is I mean, I think XY Jet and Promises Fulfilled just light off and go really fast. And if this horse can break, take just a tiny bit of a sit, and has space to come around, he could actually end up getting a really nice trip just behind them. He was my tepid selection in a race that is most likely to be won by an American horse, as so often is the case.
And to remind folks, Marcus has his expanded stakes preview of the Dubai Golden Shaheen at video.drf.com and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We will move to the 9-furlong Dubai Turf. Marcus, we've got a superstar in this race, or a potential one at that, the number 7, Almond Eye. She is a sensational Japanese mare. She won the Japan Cup last time out at odds of 2-5. Her merits are rather obvious on paper. She is going to have to run this race off of a layoff, and she's going to be facing a rather decent horse with recency, and that is Godolphin's Dream Castle, who has run the gamut thus far during the Racing Carnival, including a nice score in the Jebel Hada.
Yeah, he has had a really nice winter, but he has not met the likes of the horses he's facing in this race, and I do feel like his major goal was probably the Jebel Hata. I don't look at him as a horse who I would want to be playing against the best horses in this race. I mean, I have no interest in opposing Almond Eye, even at an incredibly short price for a field this large. You know, she's just. We'll see what happens. I have no problem with anybody trying to take her on the grounds of she hasn't traveled before. She's a huge hype horse. She's going to be bet below fair value. This is obviously just a first start of the year, but at the same time, this is an important race for her and her connections. If they think she's an international star and they want to prove that she is. I have no doubt that she's ready to run a really good race. She had a fast turf work here on Wednesday, took Thursday off, and came back this morning, Friday morning, with a very vigorous training session. The work took nothing out of her. She sure looks like she's traveled well. Christophe Mayer could be happier with the way she's gotten over here. And what makes her seem special is that if you watch her races, she's won from a variety of tactical situations, having to launch a huge late run through a straight home stretch, sitting handy like she did last time in the Japan Cup, albeit with a weight advantage as a 3-year-old filly facing older males like the runner-up Kiseki. But she can do a lot of different things. She's got, I think, a phenomenal distance range where she can produce her best run, and I do think that she's going to validate what we've seen so far. I really do think that Japanese horses Japanese female horses in particular have a decent chance of running. They could sweep the trifecta. Vivlos won this race, was second last year. She ran a really strong race behind Beauty Generation in the Hong Kong Mile last time at a distance you would think was probably a little short of her best. She was going to be retired, but ran so well there that they decided to come back with another run in Dubai. Deirdre didn't run very well in her lead into her trip to Meydan last year when she ran just behind Vivlos, dead heated for third. So I'm not too worried about her kind of average run in the Nakayama Kinen last out. She also ran especially well in Hong Kong. Those two horses are both dangerous. Also, one worth mentioning, I think, is Lord Glitters, who probably didn't want a whole lot to do with the super soft going in the QE2 when last seen at Ascot in the fall. And in the Woodbine Mile, he just had no chance whatsoever. They went so slow at front and came home in incredibly fast fractions. He finished sixth, but it's a six where like you can't take it at face value at all. Zero chance in the race. The trainer David O'Meara has done well shipping horses out of England before, and he's going to be a big price.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Marcus here. I don't have any real pretensions to trying to get Almond Eye beat. She's looked an absolute superstar in Japan. She's only been beaten the once. She was the Japanese fillies Triple Crown winner. She's shown that she can act over a variety of different distances. The form rating that she already has put up now is at a 126 on Timeform metrics, and that suggests, as a 3-year-old filly putting up 126, the fact that now she's 4 and bigger and stronger, she could well break the 130 barrier, and you're talking very, very high class horses when they can break the 130 barrier. I don't think there's anything in this race with any pretensions to get to 130 on Timeform ratings. Looking underneath Almond Eye, I thought I Can Fly was interesting. The race she won at Dundalk last time was nothing more than an exercise gallop for her, really. If you look back to her run at Ascot last year, when second to Roaring Lion, although Roaring Lion was a little bit below his best that day, she did push him hard. She had some good horses in behind. The ground was on the soft side there at Ascot, and I think that the key here is that in terms of the makeup of both Ascot's straight course and Dubai's turf, is that they're very, very similar. They're both sand-based turf tracks, and horses that have shown good form at Ascot can generally reproduce that at Meydan, Blue Point being a case in question. And I went for I Can Fly underneath Almond Eye here, but I've got no pretensions to try and beat Almond Eye, and I just sit back and hopefully watch her put up another top-class performance.
Next up is the Dubai Shima Classic, going a 1.5 miles on the turf. Perhaps a tepid favorite will be Godolphin's Old Persian, who won the local prep, the Group 2 Dubai City of Gold, but won by a scant nose that day. And if you don't fancy the City of Gold as a race on a whole, I guess you could go back to Japan once again. Rey de Oro seems top class to me. Runner-up in the 2017 Japan Cup, winner of the prestigious Tenno Show the fall, Emperor's Cup in Japan last year, and runner-up in the Arima Kinen. So this horse has a tremendous amount of class, and he might be the one outsider to worry about. Magic Wand is coming off of some nice races, although some hard races in North America. I like her getting back to 1.5 miles. Mark, your thoughts on the Shima Classic?
Yeah, I think in terms of actual form and achievement, Rey de Oro has achieved the most in here of these. He's a top class Group 1 winner in Japan. Not too worried that he was beaten last time out. He was only beaten narrowly. He ran very, very close to his best that day. In terms of figures, there's virtually nothing between him and Old Persian, whereas Rey de Oro, he's actually achieved. Old Persian is more about potential. Now, if you go back to Old Persian's run last time, he only just got it done narrowly, but he was much, much the best in that race. He got into a fair bit of trouble, and his turn of foot got him him out of trouble. He was worth probably 2 to 3 lengths on top in the Dubai City of Gold there. And he's a horse who's very, very much moving forward, Old Persian. He's yet to crack it at Group 1 level, but I think he may get it done in here. In terms of value, there's probably, looking at the way the UK books have priced this up, there's very little between him and Ray Dioro. I think if you look at Magic Wand, Aidan O'Brien's filly, she ran a decent race last time, when second in the Pegasus World Cup turf, and I think she could maybe get a share of this. But for me, this is all about Old Persian and Ray Dioro, and it's which way you want to jump, really. Do you want to go with the proven top-class form of Ray Dioro, or do you want to go with the up-and-comer in Old Persian? I just, and very, very tentatively, landed on the side of Old Persian here, because I think he's a horse moving forward. I think he could go on to prove himself top class in Europe this season coming, but there's very, very little between them for me.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. I mean, I went the other direction, just narrowly siding with Ray Dioro, and that was mainly on the basis of expected pricing, because as Mark mentioned, on level of accomplishment, Ray Dioro does have an advantage. And while Old Persian, yes, he overcame a lot of traffic and finished with a real flourish. He was running down in racing history a solid but unspectacular performer at this high level. And when I first started looking into this race, one concern of mine was Ray Dioro's performance in this race last year, where I thought he would have an excellent chance to win, and he was beaten 5 lengths. But that race was a complete parade. The running positions didn't really change at all. Hawkville led all the way, and the other 2 horses that ran second and third chased him. Nobody could make up any ground, and this horse actually finished well enough for me. His last race, watching that unfold, he lost considerable ground throughout that race at Nakayama, and I think ran perfectly well. If he's a little bit bigger price, I think that he would offer a little bit more value than Old Persian, who as was said, you're banking on his improvement this year, and if that's the case, then I mean you should be getting a little bit more value, I think, than something like the 8 to 5, which he's listed on the morning line I see, and I do believe he will be favored. And then it's a kind of master of the obvious analysis, I think, of this whole thing. I don't see anything coming that's unusual. Magic One for me would be a third horse. I don't know that she loved the softer course at Gulfstream last time on the World Cup card, and getting back on something firmer here and out to a mile and a half again could really suit her. Is she capable of beating the top 2? I wouldn't rule it out, but I have her third.
And now the main event of this star-studded card, the $12 million Group 1 Dubai World Cup at 1.25 miles. Of course, we have the defending champion of this race, Thunder Snow. We have already discussed him. He is mired in a very difficult outside post position. You have 2 very sharp horses during the carnival, Capizano, North America. These 2 horses breaking right next to each other with similar running styles. They both have a lot of early speed. Marcus, we'll start with you. Does this race perhaps set up for a closer, perhaps one of the American-based closers, a Yoshida, a Seeking the Soul, and a true closer like Gunnevera?
Yes, I believe it does. That's exactly, Dan, how I'm approaching the race. I'd hope the track is fair. I'm just going along with the perspective that it is going to be fair, that it's not going to be an inside speed bias track. If it is, whoever between those 2 horses you mentioned, Capizano and North America, if one of them can wrest an early advantage, they're going to be dangerous. But I don't think that's going to happen. What I thought was really curious is the way they drew this race. The names were selected at random, but then the connections got to choose their post. North America was the first name called. Trainer Satish Seymour picked number 3. And then the connections of Capizano had an opportunity to draw outside of him and instead chose to go inside, which I didn't understand at all. I think it assures a very strong pace. I also think that Thunder Snow, having won from the front last time and losing ground late when outrun early by Capizano in round 3 of the Al Maktoum Challenge is going to be ridden forwardly from this outside draw. And if he's, he could be attacking early, also adding fuel to the pace fire. I know that Thunderstone is supposed to improve off of that race. I wanted to see more life from him at the end of that first run of the year. I mean, if he's supposed to be a really good horse, I don't think he's supposed to be just really fading. Another 100 yards, and he's probably 4th in the race. I also think that, he is who he is. He doesn't have any upside at all to me. I'm absolutely against him. And while North America has looked good bullying inferior competition on the lead, if this horse Capizano is able to run with him around the turn and down the backstretch, I think he's going to be softened up. And I do look for this race to come apart late. And I'm shocked to hear myself say it in a way, but I have Gunnevera on top, and I actually kind of like him to win this race, not just as a wild stab, but he beat Thunder Snow in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and I think he truly does stay a mile and a quarter, despite being dialed in, who you wouldn't necessarily think would transfer that ability to his offspring. He hasn't won a big race, a very big race, but he's come close. His Breeders' Cup and in Saratoga he's run well. I like that he's got the 1. I think he's just going to sit there. I know that he ran poorly in this race last year, but I just think that he's a completely different horse. He had colic off the plane last season. Nothing went right for him during the week. He looked bedraggled and he ran lackluster. Just it immediately strikes you when you see him in the morning as a different animal this year. Things have gone well for him. I don't think he likes the slop last time at Gulfstream. I don't think Gulfstream is really a track that suits him. I know he's run well there at times, but the long home stretch here really gives him a chance to unwind. And if he gets a run into the pace that I think we're going to see, I think he's going to have an excellent chance. Yoshida is a horse that I was definitely considering. I don't trust him quite as much to get the mile and a quarter as I do Gunnevera. I think that he probably maxes out at 9 furlongs. I do think he'll run well. And Seeking the Soul, I have exactly the same concern. He's probably going to get first run on those other 2, and it comes in off of maybe the best last start of anybody with his second to City of Light in the Pegasus. I'm not entirely certain he'll be able to finish it off at the trip, but I do think he's going to run a competitive race. Those are the 3 for me.
Yeah, I think for me, Marcus has summed that up really well. The key here is going to be Capizano and North America from those inside posts 2 and 3. Now, the caveat I would put into that, though, is that North America has broken slowly in the past, as he did in this very race last year when his race was over at the start. And that's not the first time he's been slowly away. And if he is slowly away, potentially he hands a big advantage to his pace rival, Capizano. Now, Capizano has miling speed, so you would think he would be the leader into the first turn. If they do hook up, Capizano and North America, then you could see them easily going too quickly and setting this up for a closer if the track plays fair. I, like Marcus, was against Thunder Snow. I think his wide draw gives him a very, very difficult task, considering all the speed that's inside in this race, which is quite a bit different to the setup he got last year. If the track plays fair for me and this race unfolds at a quick pace, I think a closer will definitely come into it. I was just the other way around from Marcus, actually. I just favoured Yoshida over Gunnevera. I think there's enough stamina in his pedigree to say, as an older horse, 5 years old, bigger and stronger, that he can get this 10 furlongs. I think the race sets up nicely for him. Gunnevera, you've got to think that he'll be closing late, especially if Connections choose to be brave and stick to that inside rail all the way around, ride him full up, because the inside does tend to ride really well more often than not at Meydan. And if they stick to that rail as long as they dare and hope that the gaps come for him, then Gunnevera will definitely be closing well late. Seeking the Soul, again, I just have a little worry over the 10 furlongs for him. Pavel, he is he's got sneaky speed as Pavel, and I could see him being certainly on the tail of Capizano and North America here, which should help the pace scenario. But for me, I just landed on Yoshida.
Well, I'd like to thank Marcus and Mark for their excellent insight, our producer Jacob Luft for keeping things running so smoothly, and I'd like to thank you for attending. Dubai World Cup Night's one of the classiest race meetings of the year, with grade and Group 1 winners from across the globe. Best of luck with all your wagers.